Yorkshire is home to some of the most beautiful landscapes and fascinating buildings in the UK. This includes some of the most fantastic follies. Follies were buildings that served only really an ornamental purpose. They were an architectural craze that mainly existed during the 18th and 19th centuries. These bizarre buildings often have stories that are as incredible as they are striking to look at. So, let's explore some of the best follies you can find in God's own county. Wainhouse Tower. Yorkshire is England's largest county, so it stands to reason it should also be home to the world's largest folly. Built between 1871 and 1875, Wainhouse Tower was originally commissioned as a chimney. However, it never fully achieved this purpose and instead lives purely as a design feature. A very large design feature, mind you, considering it is 253 feet tall with around 403 steps. For the record, that is taller than the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the Arc de Triomphe, or about 13 giraffes stood on one another. It's situated in Halifax, Calderdale, West Yorkshire. Halifax gets its name from the Old English word hal gifiat, translating to area of coarse grass in the nook of a land, and was recorded in 1091 as Halifax. Calderdale is a borough that gets its name from the river Calder, which in turn is thought to have meant hard or violent water, and dale, a word for valley. Throughout the 19th century, Halifax grew expeditiously, with the population increasing from 9,000 in 1800 to 25,000 by the middle of the century. Steam-powered textile factories, mills, open sewers, slum-like housing, and smoke from the industries meant that Halifax was not the picturesque place that it is today. It was this smoke, and indeed this industrial growth, that meant Wainhouse Tower had to be built where it is, and also built so tall. Wainhouse is the name of the man who commissioned it, John Edward Wainhouse. Born in 1817, he inherited his uncle Robert Wainhouse's factory used for making dyes in 1856. Known as the Washer Lane Dye Works, for they were situated on Washer Lane, they produced an awful amount of smoke in an already smoke-filled town. Industrial smoke was such an issue that in 1870 the Smoke Abatement Act was passed, dictating that smoke was to be taken out of the valley. As such, Wainhouse commissioned that the chimney be built out of the valley on the hill, and so large that it would take smoke into the sky instead of into the valley. It took 9,000 tons of material to build and a staggering £15,000. In today's money, that's a whopping 939,000. It never achieved this function of a chimney, however, as the dye works were sold off in 1874. Furthermore, the original architect, Isaac Booth, also left the project in 1873, and hence building was finished by another architect and another owner. John Wainhouse died in 1883. During the Second World War, Wainhouse Tower was an observation post, and after the Local Government Act of 1974, it became the property of Calderdale Council. It's also known as the Tower of Spite. Whilst this sounds straight out of a Tolkien novel, it actually alludes to a feud between Wainhouse and his neighbour, Sir Henry Edwards. Owner of the nearby canal mills, Edwards and Wainhouse first started bickering over the smoke nuisance from the dye works. Edwards also boasted that no one could see inside the grounds of his mansion, Pye Nest. This is why Wainhouse Tower has the observation post on top, so that he could peep in to his neighbour's grounds. Needle's Eye. Located in the quaint village of Wentworth in South Yorkshire, is the UK's largest private residence, and perhaps the most mythologised folly in the country. Wentworth Woodhouse, with the longest European facade of 606 feet and over 300 rooms, is built so big because the man who owned it, Thomas Watson Wentworth, not only wanted to impress his political allies, but also to outshine his cousin who he was feuding with. He also had numerous follies built on his estate to also showcase his wealth and status, as well as mark out his territory. The first folly commissioned by Thomas was the 45 feet tall Needle's Eye. Built between 1723 and 1728, it was so called because it was shaped like the end of a needle, and the gateway was the eye. Made out of ashlar blocks, the arabesque monument is surmounted by a decorative urn, and the ogee archway has stone benches inside for travellers. It was built upon a former coach road that led up to Wentworth Woodhouse, and also marks the northernmost part of the Wentworth estates. Some of the myths surrounding the folly are incredulous, but are simply just myths, unfortunately. One story goes that it was built as a wager by either Charles Watson Wentworth, Thomas's son, or the fourth Earl Fitzwilliams, Charles's nephew, who inherited the estates after Charles had died. They bet that they could drive a horse through the eye of a needle. One major problem arises with these stories, however. Neither of them were born when this was built. This may arise from the fact that there was a gun carriage display driven past Wentworth in August 1914, and they may have gone through Needle's eye. The other story is that the markings on the side were musket inflicted when a firing squad was unleashed upon Jacobites there. Unfortunately, there is no evidence to support this. Whilst it is true that the Watson Wentworths forced against the Jacobites in 1745, it seems unlikely they would execute them right against their own property. Druids Temple. Located near the North Yorkshire village of Ilton, near Masham, is Yorkshire's Stonehenge. This is the Druids Temple, and it was neither used by Druids, nor was it a temple. Some follies were not built purely to show off or to have deeper meanings. Some were known as famine follies, for example, which were commissioned to provide poor relief during economic strife, such as the Great Famine of Ireland. The Druids Temple is an example of one of these. Built around 1820, the Druids Temple was commissioned by William Danby, a writer and sheriff of Yorkshire. He owned the magnificent Swinton Park Estates in Masham, which is now a Grade II listed building and 31-bedroom luxury hotel. Owing to the Napoleonic Wars and other economic hardships at the time, local workers were in desperate need of an income. Danby, therefore, decided to hire them to construct this folly on his estate. They were paid 1 shilling a day, which equates to between £2 and £3 today. He chose this style because England was in the throes of fascination with Druids, harking back to a time of heroes, a golden age of Britain, and a time of mystery and intrigue. Druids were high-ranking people of the ancient Celts, often being religious leaders, and often undertook roles such as priests. Stonehenge was chosen because it was believed, wrongly it was later found, to have been built by Druids in 460 BC. The temple itself is hundreds of feet long, and the stones standing at 10 feet tall. There is a sacrificial altar, although you may be rest assured no one has been sacrificed upon it. At the back of the temple is an enclosed space, which is meant to be a tomb. Danby supposedly hired out a hermit to dwell in the tomb as part of a 7-year contract. This was also common practice by wealthy landowners stretching back to the 1400s. Known as garden hermits or ornamental hermits, they would usually be local poor and hired out as economic relief. Their tasks could range from simply being silent and observed to giving out advice. It is rumoured that the hermit here at the temple was required to grow out his hair and remain silent, but after just 4 years, he left the role and apparently went insane. No one else was successful prior, and no one else was hired afterwards. On the hillside overlooking the temple is a stack of stones which is meant to represent the symbol of deity, and there are piles of stones scattered throughout the nearby woodland which you can walk through. There is parking and a bistro nearby, and the place is owned by the Swinton Estates. Bizarrely, in 2000, Baroness Masham of Ilton pleaded with Parliament to restrict public access after her secretary allegedly found a pig's head on the altar. The Baroness declared, "There has been devil worship here." What is important to remember about these follies is that they are often situated within beautiful countryside, and other fantastic historic sites are almost always only a stone's throw away. Moreover, there are more incredible follies throughout Yorkshire, each with their own unique story. There is one thing I implore you to do regarding these amazing buildings, and it can be summed up in one word: explore.